There we go. Well, as people filter in, let me just say hello and welcome to UXPA International's Webinar Wednesday. I'm Dr. Abby Goodrum. I'm the Director of Education for the User Experience Professionals Association International. And as many of you know, each month we here at UXPA do our best to bring you insightful, inspiring, sometimes provocative content by UX leaders from around the world. Yay. And so tonight I'm really excited, giddy actually, to welcome Jared Spool as our Wednesday webinar guest. Hi, Jared. I feel like everyone already knows who you are. You've worked in tech for more than 40 years, and you really were in the vanguard of usability and UX research and UX strategy. You've written several books, you've published hundreds of articles, you've given talks all over the world, and Leaders of Awesomeness, right? Leaders of Awesomeness, the online community that you founded, it's grown to what, is it more than 40,000 now?
45.
45,000 UX designers, researchers, content strategists. I really, Jared, I really don't know what more I can say by way of introduction other than welcome. We're so glad that you've joined us tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Here's a piece of trivia. I was the keynote speaker at the very first UPA conference in 1993, 92 in Orem, Utah. So, Abby, is there a way we can enable the chat?
Yes, it is. And the Q&A is enabled as well. Okay.
The chat is not.
Okay, something's wrong with it. Show chat previews.
Yeah.
It says it's working. Hold on.
It's not enabled for attendees.
Let me bug out. You talk and I'll try to fix that while we're going.
Okay. So hello. I am internet sensation and gold medal winner Jared Spool. I am very happy to be here today talking to y'all about UX outcomes, in particular UX outcomes as a way to spark UX in an organization. And so I thought I would talk for about 20 minutes to half an hour and then sort of open things up for Q&A. At any point in time, just feel free to put questions into the Q&A thingy. That will work just fine. Hopefully we'll get chat working so that you can put stuff there too. We'll see how that works. Let's see, is it working? So we'll see if y'all can use that. Yes, it is. There we go. Magic. Okay. Zoom is a reminder that usability is important. Just going to point that out. Okay. So these days I spend a lot of time with folks, particularly on strategy. That's the work that I'm doing, and the reason that's important is that a lot of UX work is continues to be exceptionally tactical. Basically the work that we do is really focused on execution and delivery. And if you ask a UX professional these days, what do you do all day? what people will talk about is they will talk about the activities. They'll talk about things like usability testing and talk about writing reports, and if they're designers, they'll talk about maybe wireframes, or creating Figma files, or sitting in endless meetings. But these activities, these things are all tactical, right? They're basically the tactical work of UX. And in that regard, we can think of them all as basically outputs, right? They're the deliverables that we put out into the world that show that we have been doing something. And I'm going to apologize right now for the font I've chosen for today, which is sans legibility. It's the best I can do, but this is basically what we do. But the problem with outputs is that they have no inherent notion of quality. They are a usability testing could produce great results. It could also be poorly done. The reports we write could be really insightful, or they could just be completely ignored. The wireframes we produce could be innovative, or they could just be, sort of a miserable experience that the user will end up going through, right? None of these things have built into them any inherent notion of quality. And we have to layer quality on top of them to get them to work. And that's the notion of outputs. Outputs are just things we deliver into the world, and they really, there's nothing there that is particularly meaningful from a quality standpoint. So we end up with a community where some people do a great job and some people do a poor job, and it averages out to a mediocre job. And that is not delivering a great reputation to our field, to the work that we do, to the things that happen. And in general, user experience in many organizations is seen as what in the 1970s, 1980s, when I worked at a digital equipment corporation, was known as a PPG, a product prevention group. We're a group that takes forever to do work, and all we do is tell people it's not good enough and whine about how we're not getting the job done. And that's unfortunately what is happening for a lot of folks. For other folks, what we're seeing here is everything focuses on the delivery of these things. And because of methodologies like Agile, which have been implemented fairly poorly, what we start to see is that everything focuses on trying to deliver these things as quickly as possible, to squeeze them down to small time-boxed 2-week events. And the nature of that is that everything feels like we're in a feature factory. And this is leading to burnout. This is leading to a lot of morale issues. People are saying that this isn't what they signed up for. And I think to some extent, we're seeing a little bit of a brain drain coming into this to begin with. And then on top of that, there's this immense pool of talent that is waiting to get an opportunity to work in the field. who is not being given an opportunity to work in the field because they're running into the conventional catch-22 that you can't get a job unless you have experience, and you can't get experience if no one's going to give you a job. So the phenomena there is that we run into this problem that folks are in this place where there is all this fresh, wonderful, exciting group of people that would really like to come and contribute, but they're struggling to get a job too. And so we're in this sort of weird tactical mode in much of the organization. But the good news is that there are people who are breaking out of it. There are people who are becoming strategic. And in order to become strategic, they're moving away from outcomes to what we call away from outputs to what we call outcomes. And an outcome focus approach is that you don't look at the deliverables. What you look for is, in essence, the change in the world that happens because we delivered something. So we're actually looking for change when we're outcome driven. When we're output driven, we just focus on putting things out. We just focus on delivering new outputs. But when we are outcome driven, what we're looking to do is figure out what the change in the world is. And one of the interesting things about looking for change is that change can go in different directions. And we can either be making things better, or we can be making things worse. And so when we're talking about change in the world, there's an inherent quality element in this, because in order for us to measure the change, we immediately have to see if we've made things better or we've made things worse. And so by shifting from being output driven to outcome driven, we go from being tactical to being strategic. And we start to see benefits. Now, one of the things about being tactical is that when you're tactical, you're situation agnostic. And being situation agnostic means that we don't really care what the situation is. A usability test is a usability test is a usability test. Wireframes are a wireframe or a wireframe. The way we do reports are the same. And you see this all over the community, right? There's any number of Medium articles or webinars or things on how to write usability reports or how to create layers and proper Figma files. And all of the stuff that focuses on outputs never takes into account what you do differently if the context changes, what you do differently if the process changes. Take personas, for example. There's personas which have proven time and time again to actually practically be useless, is still considered the first step of your UX process. And the thing about tactical is that people are very process focused. And you start to try to do things in a very formulaic way. And I spend much of my day trying to convince UX leaders who have come out of a tactical environment that process adds almost no value to the work that we do, because it doesn't take into account that different things, different contexts, different situations, different groups of people need different activities, need different plans, and will need to have different outcomes. an example of this is this sort of common belief that you sort of build a lean style MVP like prototype for things, put it into the world and see if it works. That might work for a startup. It usually doesn't, but it has better potential working for a startup. But in the world of government, for example, that's completely unethical. In order to put something into the world that could potentially damage the experience, could harm people because it's not proven to actually make sure that everybody has an equitable experience, that is something that we shouldn't allow. But in a tactical world, we don't talk about those types of changes. But when we get strategic, now suddenly we have to focus on this. And so this is a big mindset change, right? This move from being tactical to being strategic, where process no longer functions, and instead we have to be situationally aware. And we have to instead be more systems approach instead of dealing with a unflexible process, but we have to have a flexible systems approach. This is really the change that has to happen. And this is what the bulk of my work is about these days, is this idea of moving from outputs to outcomes. So let's talk about that for a little bit. The idea of outcomes is that they're a change in the world, that things can get either better or they can get worse. And what we want to do is we want to understand, well, how do we make things better from a user experience perspective? And one of the things that I think has gotten a little lost is the idea of actually thinking about experiences. In this move to change everything to be focused on products and services, we've left out the actual experiences. So the sort of common phenomena that I see is that somebody shows up with an idea of something to build. Let's say a salesman walks in the door and says, I've got a customer who has a big bag of money, and they want to give us that big bag of money if we will build for them a particular functionality. Let's say it's data export, because everything needs data export. So they will give us a big bag of money if we give them data export. So what's happening here is that the customer has come in declaring some sort of solution they need to make their life better. This is, a feature or a product or a service. That's the request. That's what they're doing. And this feature, this data export thing that they are asking for, success is considered when we deliver it. That's it. We take data export and we deliver it. Now, all the UX people in the room are like, well, how do we know if it's a good thing? And the rest of the team is like, well, nobody told us anything about this, so we don't. And what does it matter? They're going to give us the big bag of money when we deliver them data export. But what's missing from here is any understanding of experience. We don't know why the customer went to the salesperson to ask for data export. And so we have to look at the experience to understand what's happening here. And the way to look at experience is to look at this idea that that there is a timeline, and when someone is doing an activity, whatever the activity is that data export would be really helpful for. When someone is doing an activity, that activity happens over time, right? There's a first step and a second step and a third step, whatever it is. Maybe somewhere in here, they're taking data from our product and they're typing it into some other product because the products don't talk to each other. And that's what they think data export would be useful for. And we can measure this timeline in terms of a scale of extreme frustration to extreme delight. And this scale of extreme frustration to extreme delight, if we spend time with a person who's trying to do whatever it is data export is supposed to eventually help them with, we can look at that and we can observe that. So the person who we're spending time with is Edna. Edna is not a persona. Edna is a real person. We start with Edna. We start with a real person. Your person may not be named Edna, but it doesn't matter. Edna, whoever it is, they're a real person. And if we look at Edna's experience, we see that whatever this first step is, it's a bit delightful. Edna's really pleased with it. She's happy. But as she goes on, suddenly things become a bit frustrating. And the next few steps, she's frustrated, but then it gets a little better. And the step after that, it's not too bad. She's happy with it. And then suddenly it gets really bad and she's really frustrated with what's going on. And then maybe it becomes delightful again. And we can see that Edna's experience is changing over time, and that it's oscillating on this scale of somewhere between extreme frustration and extreme delight. And by just recording when it's delightful and when it's frustrating, we get a good picture of Edna's experience. We can call this her current experience. Now, Edna's just one person. And as you've probably run into, people are rarely satisfied when you only know the experience of one person. Because is Edna an outlier or is Edna's experience common? So we're going to have to go talk to other people. We're going to go talk to Danielle, and we're going to talk to Ginny, and we're going to talk to Johnny, and we're going to map out their experiences too. And all of their experiences, they're either going to be completely different patterns or there's going to be some similarity. And whichever way it turns out, that's really important knowledge for us. But we can start to take this data and we can take Edna's experience. Let's say Edna has the most interesting experience because Edna's experience represents sort of the best and the worst of what we see across all the people that we've talked to. So if we can make Edna's experience better, we make a lot of people's experiences better. So when we look at things that way, we can then start to ask the question, what would a better experience for Edna be? What if we could imagine an experience that is delightful at every step? That somehow we're going to take the frustrating bits and make them more delightful through design work. We're going to identify what makes the frustration frustrating, and we're going to change the design until it's delightful. And we're going to do that for the frustrating bits. And you know what? In the process of doing that, we're also going to make the things that are already delightful just a little bit more delightful. So we're making Edna's life better. Maybe this is what data export would do for Edna, is make it delightful all the way across. But we won't know that until we actually go meet Edna and see the experience that Edna has. And so this is taking a snapshot of Edna's experience. Well, this delightful bar here is aspirational. This is the aspirational experience. We haven't gotten there yet, but we could imagine an experience that's better. And if we talk about this in experiential terms, what we're actually doing is talking about what it's like for Edna. We're not talking about the features we want to build into the product. We're talking about what makes the frustrating parts frustrating and what makes the delightful parts delightful. And how do we make it more delightful all the way across? That's the experience that we're talking about. So when they came to us and they said, well, we want data export, there was a solution. That was presumed without any understanding as to whether it would make Edna's life more delightful or not. The assumption is it would. Maybe it was Edna herself who suggested it. So we can go with the idea that somehow it's going to make her life better, but we don't know how. And this is where the idea of a UX outcome comes in. Because the UX outcome is not about the output of delivering data export. The UX outcome is about making Edna's life better. And so we can think of a UX outcome as basically the answer to a question. And the question is, if we do a great job on the feature, on the product, on the thing that we're building, right? If we do a great job on this, how do we improve someone's life? That's the question we need to answer. If we do a great job, how do we improve someone's life? If we can answer that question, then we know what this aspirational line needs to be. If we look at the current experience and we then say, well, you know what? I think we can improve Edna's life in these ways. Then suddenly that gives us the answer to our question. We now have a UX outcome for at least Edna. And if we looked at what happens with Danielle and what happens with Ginny and what happens with Johnny, and we look at their experiences, we can see, well, would the same things that make Edna's life better make Danielle or Ginny or Johnny's life better? And if we can answer yes to that question, we now know that this UX outcome would be really valuable. And so this idea of a UX outcome is that it's an improvement, some sort of improvement in somebody's life, hopefully many people's lives, that comes from the solution. But the problem with this is that we started with the solution. And in order to do this, we can't start with the solution. The solution's not in this picture at all. We have to start with the current experience. So the current experience lives way over here in our little diagram, our model of being outcome driven. And in order to understand the current experience, we have to go out and do the things we're really good at. We have to go meet a whole bunch of people. And we have to see that, you know, Edna's experience is one thing, and Danielle's experience is another thing, and Ginny's experience is another thing, and Johnny's experience is another thing. And it's across all these different things that we start to learn what the outcomes need to be and what outcomes we're going to work on first. Because each of these, we can ask the question, what if it was delightful all the way across? And what would that similarity have to be? So we're feeding all of this into the current experience. That's our understanding. And the best thing as UX professionals we can do is help the team develop a deep shared understanding of the current experience. But the solution has been completely divorced from the current experience. We know going into this project that we're supposed to be building data export. But if we step back and say, well, we're not supposed to be building data export. We are supposed to be getting the improvement in Edna and Danielle and Ginny and Johnny's lives. That we can start to say, okay, well, why is it that Edna and Danielle and Ginny and Johnny cannot get that improvement today? I mean, what's preventing them from actually just getting the improvement, their life just becoming suddenly better? And that's when we start to make a list of problems. And this list of problems are the problems that we have to solve. So we can call them problems to solve. And they're literally just a list of things that have to be solved in order for Edna and Ginny and everybody else's life to get improved. And so we look at the current experience. We ask the question, why can't they get the improvement, this better experience by themselves? We have to figure out, well, what is it going to take to solve those problems? Solving those problems is what we're going to have to figure out to inch the experience up, baby step by baby step. And then we can say, okay, well, now we know what to build. And maybe it's data export. But maybe what we find out when we study the current experience is that Edna is asking for data export because Edna knows what a data export is. But when we ask the question, well, what are you exporting for? She tells us that she's exporting into Excel. And when we ask her what she does with the data in Excel, or better yet, we watch what she does with the data in Excel, we find out that she's producing reports. And when we find out what she does with the reports, it turns out she's producing charts. And when we find out what she does with the charts, it turns out she's taking those charts and showing them to management to show how much better the system is performing than it used to be performing. And she's doing all this because we haven't given her a really good dashboard to show her management that shows how well the system is performing. So she's taken it on herself to basically build a dashboard out of Excel, and she wants an easier way to export data. And sure, she wants an easier way to export data, but that only solves a piece of her problem. She still has to spend hours of her time producing reports and making charts and sending them to her executives. Why can't we just have the data show up at the executives right away? And so now we have an outcome here, which is we improve Edna's life when her executives see the value of her work because the data in the system is growing in the right directions. And that's the improvement. And it actually wants a different solution than the data export that was put on the table to start with. How much more would Edna and her company give us? How much bigger would the bag of money be if we actually solved the whole problem, not just what they asked for? And so that's the model. Now, here's the thing. We all know that we don't get things right every moment, that sometimes we produce a solution that doesn't get the outcome. It doesn't move the needle the way we hope. The improvement is not there. Edna's life does not get better. Well, we can take that information and feed it back into our understanding of the problem. And by feeding that back into our understanding of the problem, we can then turn around and create a better solution. And hopefully that will move the needle the next time. But if it doesn't, we can just keep iterating between understanding the problem better and producing different solutions. This is we're very familiar with. This is the tactical approach to UX. But the strategic approach says that we always go back to the current experience. And in fact, the strategy approach says that what we really want to do is we want to focus most of our energy, not on the solution, which is what we do when we're tactical, by usability testing features until they're slightly better. What we want to do is focus all of our energy on understanding the current experience and understanding the problems. There's an old saying, which is, great designers don't fall in love with their solutions. Great designers fall in love with the problem. If we can get everybody in the organization to fall in love with the problem, then we're going to get better solutions. What we want is for our organization to become the world's foremost experts in our users, their current experience, and the problems that are preventing them from getting great outcomes. And when we start to frame what we're doing as taking this current experience, which has all of these frustrating bits that users are having, and we're going to eliminate that frustration and make it delightful all the way across by improving people's lives. This brings meaning. Meaning is, for people, is by doing my job, I make other people's lives better. That's a way we can think of work being meaningful. And when work is meaningful, the pressures of the work, the issues of the work, they become much more worth it. The challenges that we have to go through become much better. But this gets even better because we can get our business partners to get very excited about outcomes because improvements have real value. This is the last thing I'll draw, and then we can take some questions. If we go back to our timeline, and remember our timeline is on a scale of extreme frustration to extreme delight. Well, everything that falls below this neutral point is frustrating. Everything down here is frustrating. We can refer to that frustration as poor user experiences, right? Anything that frustrates our user is undesirable. It's a poor user experience. We can do better. Now, the part of the experience that exists above the neutral point, right? And one way to think about the neutral point, right, is it's neither frustrating nor delightful. If we were talking about food, it would be edible, right? And no one gets excited about edible food. Nobody goes and says, oh, you got to try the new restaurant down the street. Their food is amazingly edible. By the way, satisfaction surveys, how satisfied are you? Satisfaction is a neutral term. People are satisfied when something is no longer frustrated, but not really very delightful. That is still satisfactory. Satisfactory is not the high bar we should be shooting for. But I digress. When we're above the neutral point, we're now into things that are beginning to be delightful. We can refer to that as a good user experience. So the delightful things in this range are good. And we should be happy with that. But delight is a relative scale. And if we keep improving the product, we get to great UX. And great UX often has very similar characteristics. It is a great UX is it exceeds expectations. Right. Which, you know, by the way, poor UX misses expectations. We expected it to be better, but it wasn't. So that's why it's frustrating. Why is this so hard, right? Our expectation is much higher than what we're being delivered. So great UX exceeds expectations and it anticipates needs, right? It shocks us when it delivers something that is better than we expected. And that idea of great UX is not only inspiring to work on, but for our business brethren, it is valuable because value increases every time we move up the scale. When we make things go from poor UX to good UX, we increase the value. People are literally willing to give us more money. When we go from good UX to great UX, people are willing to give us huge value, huge money. This is why a luxury brand, this is why a company like Apple or a company like Disney can charge much higher prices for a product than any of their competitors, because they do a better job of exceeding expectations and anticipating needs. And so by increasing value every time, we are making our business partners excited because they're responsible for delivering better value into the market, because that's why people do business with us. So to summarize, if we have great outcomes, we move away from the output-based approach that we have been doing for decades, and we focus on outcomes. We see improvement in people's lives, which will generate more value. But to do that, we have to shift the way we work. We no longer can put the bulk of our resources into thinking about solutions. You look at most UX operations, and they spend 85% of their time focused on usability tests and other sort of tactical work that is focused on making the solution be the best it can be, without really understanding what problems we're trying to solve or what the current experience is. Little energy, little resources are put into this. We have to shift that. Instead of this, we want to reduce it to about 15% of our effort. And we want to take our biggest expertise and be investing 85% of the effort on becoming the world's foremost experts in the current experience and the problems to solve. We want to fall in love with the problems, not the solution. And we'll measure success when we've achieved the improvements in people's lives. And this is what I came to talk to you about. So, what questions do you have?
I have a question, Jared. Sorry, this is Abby.
Hi, Abby.
Hi, that was wonderful, by the way. I do sometimes use the outputs as a way of trying to move my client to more of an outcome focus. And so when they almost always come to me initially with, they have the solution, they know what needs to be made. And then I convince them that, well, we need to actually, study some real users, engaging in these, trying to achieve these goals or these tasks, and understand where their pain points are, and as you say, what's delightful and what's not delightful. How do we raise that bar? And so then that helps me then create, not fictitious personas, but real data-driven, research-based personas and journeys, right? That where I'm able then to take that back to the client and say, look, I know that I know you had your heart set on X, but look here, see, this is where the people have spoken, and it's not what you thought needed to be done. We could actually build something wonderful and strategic and valuable if we address this, and see, here's the output that shows that. Is that something you think is useful, using outputs in that way to try to, how do you tell a client their baby's ugly?
Well, it's so funny. One of the first projects I ever worked on was a word processor, where we were trying to, this is back in the days before word processors. I worked on some of the first word processors that were ever built. And one of the variations of the word processor that we worked on was completely a test bed for doing research. It was a completely instrumented thing where we could see exactly what people did and replay their sessions and do all this stuff. This was back in the early 80s. It was run by a guy named Jim Burrows who ran the project, and he named it, the project was named Ugly Baby, so that we could remember that this was not a product we were ever going to ship. This was purely a research test bed. Um, so it's funny that you mentioned that. I don't think you tell people their babies are ugly. I don't think that's a good idea, because it puts them on the defensive. And what I found is that they don't know how to look at the personas. They don't know how to look at the data. The outputs are tools that we use, right? One of the problems that I see is that for some reason, this field, and I think I play a role in this because this is what I did for decades. And, you know, I was there when we ran the very first software usability tests. I was literally in the room when we were doing that. I was there when, you know, we developed paper prototyping. I worked with Carolyn Snyder, who wrote the book on paper prototyping. You know, I've been around this field for a really long time, and I have been there for many of these things. And we used to be very tactical. We used to focus on process. We used to focus on telling people what we do, and people don't want to know what we do. They don't want to know that this. It's like going into a bakery, and instead of having a cabinet filled with all sorts of really delicious looking things, there's a bunch of chemical formulations to show you what the chemicals in the cupcake are versus the chemicals in the pies, so that you can understand the difference between pies and cupcakes by their chemical makeup. Nobody wants to know that. Or, you know, there's a list of the recipes to show how the pies are baked versus how the cupcakes are baked. Nobody really wants to know that either. That they want to know is this the tastiest thing you have? And I would like that tasty thing. So when we focus on our process and we talk about the process first, we're talking about the wrong thing. What we want to be talking about is what they're going to get. What is the end result of what they're going to get? And what they want to know more than anything else, at least the business people want to know, is they want to know how much more money will people pay us if we do a good job. They want to know that right now we're down here where people are talking about no longer paying us on a regular basis. And if we go here or we go here, they're gonna insist on paying us. You know, Disney doesn't tell you how they do their magic. Disney gives you the magic. And so we want to talk to people about that, not about our process. And so what we have to do is we have to show the discrepancy. Now, sure, if they think they have a good user experience and what we have to do is tell them that they don't, then yes, that's fine. But we don't have to tell them how we're going to tell them that. They have to just see. And the easiest way to get them to do that is to get them to talk about, if I put this in front of somebody, how does their life get better? Right? And get them to tell me what the outcome is. If we do a great job on this thing that you want us to build, how does it make somebody's life better? And the thing is, you know, the salesman comes in, he has the big bag of money, and he says, I just came from Edna's office, and Edna's going to give us a big bag of money if we build data export. And I say to the salesman, how does this make Edna's life better? And he will say, I don't know. Edna didn't tell me. So then the next thing I want to do is say, well, I want to go meet Edna. Because I can think of 5 different ways to build data export, and 4 of them are wrong. I just don't know which 4. So we can try and gamble. We can place a bet that we know what Edna wants without having any information. And then we can build it, and we can see if our 20% likelihood success is the success we have. But 80% odds are against us. It's 80-20 odds that we will fail. So then the real key here is that what we want to be doing is we want to be looking at what does it mean to find out what Edna's success will be. Because the more I learn about Edna and what she's trying to do, the better my odds get that I'm going to build something that will actually be valuable to her. And it turns out that if I actually spend enough time talking to Edna, I can make things even more valuable than the big bag of money she offered us, which is going to make her want to give us that and possibly more.
We have a couple of questions, one in the Q&A and two in the chat.
Okay.
Can you see them, or do you want me to read them to you?
Why don't you read them in case the people who are watching the recording can't see them?
That's a good idea. All right. So from the Q&A we have, and this is from an anonymous attendee, so I don't know who this is, but what metrics should we use to measure the improvement in people's lives that could convince stakeholders who are used to metrics based on outputs? Could you please give some examples?
Well, we could argue how used to metrics based on outputs they are, but because if you look real close, they're probably not giving any weight to that. But, and this is a whole nother talk, but I will give it in 45 seconds. The way to think about this is it turns out that there's a whole framework for metrics, and there's basically three types of metrics that we care about. There are success metrics. Oh, I should show you what I'm writing. How about I do that? Success metrics, progress metrics, and what we call problem value metrics. And the easiest way to think about this is, let's say we're running a marathon and there's a finish line. The finish line is basically the improvement in somebody's life, right? So whatever it is, in Edna's case, the improvement is her management can clearly see that the usage of the system is performing way above what they'd originally projected. And Edna's doing an amazing job. That's the finish line. And so our success metric is the very moment we cross the finish line. So success is when we've achieved the improvement. And a metric is just a measure, is just a measurement we track. And a measurement is a change we can observe in the world. So since an outcome is a change in the world, and a measurement is a change we can observe in the world, we can measure the moment that Edna's management finds out that the system is performing way above standards, way above projections. So suddenly, that's the success metric. So that checks off success metrics. Progress metrics are the milestones that happen along the way to the finish line, right? We don't just start the marathon and end up at the finish line. We have to go through a bunch of intermediate steps, right? At some point, we're a quarter of the way through, then we're halfway through, then we're 3/4 of the way through. Those are progress metrics. So we can report to our management the change that is happening, because remember, metrics are measurements that we track, and so we can track the measurements, the changes of progress that happen. So that's progress metrics. And then problem value metrics are actually the obstacles that are telling us that we're actually there. You can think of them as basically the costs of poor UX, because it turns out that whenever we deliver a poor UX, there are costs that come back to the organization. For instance, increased support or lost sales or training that has to happen, or having dedicated customer success people who are basically whose entire job is to compensate for the fact that the design itself is completely unusable. So in Boston, we have a thing called Heartbreak Hill. That's what Danielle is referring to. And Heartbreak Hill is this obstacle that occurs. And if you make it past Heartbreak Hill, you're going to finish the race. But it's Heartbreak Hill that a lot of people end up dropping out. And the thing about obstacles is that the more we can reduce Heartbreak Hill, the easier it is to finish the race. So we can track metrics in terms of the value of each problem. This is why it's called problem value metrics. So how much does a problem cost us in support? How much does it cost us in customer success specialists? How much does it cost us in lost sales? So those are the metrics that we use. Hopefully that's helpful. We actually have, I'll put it in the, we have a workshop that we recorded, and you can get the recordings for it, where I go into each of these metrics in depth. But all of these are based on outcomes. So we start with the outcome. We have to know what's the improvement in the world.
Jared, thanks so much. I feel like we could continue this on for another half an hour at least, but we are at an end of our time. We're over. And so I just want to thank you again. There were a lot of really useful action items. I'm already thinking about how to incorporate them into my work right away. And for everybody here who joined us tonight, thank you really for making time. I know your schedules are busy. And I just want to remind you that if there's anything you want to go back over, anything that Jared presented, if you didn't get the notes, the video from tonight's webinar will be posted to uxpa.org in the next day or two. So look there. Also, do not forget to register for the UXPA conference. It's taking place in Austin, Texas from June 20th to 22nd. The hotel venue is absolutely fabulous. There are going to be over 50 inspiring sessions. There's a full day of interactive, hands-on, pre-conference courses, over 100 speakers. Folks, the content at our conferences is always outstanding, and it's a great place to network and meet people, and the parties are excellent. So I hope to see all of you there. And Jared, I'd like to see you there too. If you can make time to come to Austin, I will buy you a bowl of chili.
Austin was the last UXPA conference I went to was in Austin.
But it's time. It's time.
2007, I want to think.
Well, we'll hope to see you again there. And I hope to see all of you guys there as well. Thank you so much, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Jared. Bye.